Another aspect of the importance here for the Assyrians of this kind of psychological warfare was the nature of their brutality. There are a couple of quotes here that are from inscriptions by two separate Neo Assyrian kings. I'm only going to read one of them, but we can see the different means of brutality the Assyrians enforced on populations. There was a special squad that was tasked with collecting the skulls of the conquered to count the number of killed. So they beheaded large scale members of society after the battle was over. You'd go and take all the dead soldiers and cut their heads off so you could count how many soldiers you had killed. They also flayed. The rebels were skinned alive in particular, and then they used those skins to decorate the city walls to deter anyone else from rebelling against the empire. You put people's bodies up on stakes, you impaled them. They frequently burned captives alive, and we can see this through the accounts that we see here. And there's disfiguration. They cut off arms or other body parts of captives as a way to kind of prevent them from rebelling again, not to prevent them from working or living their lives and being a productive agricultural member of society, but would have prevented them from holding a shield or a sword for the rest of their life. And we see frequent mentions of disembowelments. So the quote here is the conquest of Elam by Sennacherib. And I always like, this is one of my favorite images. I cut their throats like lambs, I cut off their precious lives as one cuts a string. Like the many waters of a storm, I made the contents of their gullets and entrails run down upon the wide earth. My prancing steeds, harnessed for my riding, plunged into the streams of their blood as into a river. The wheels of my war chariot, which brings low the wicked and the evil, were spattered with blood and filth. With the bodies of their warriors I filled the plain like grass. Their testicles I cut off and tore out their privates like the seeds of a cucumber. And so Sennacherib here kind of points to his brutality of a rebellion he puts down in Elam. And I think that this kind of recording, this script, this inscription would have been placed in a prominent avenue or location so people could see it. And it would have been accompanied with brutal imagery. So this brutality is as much a psychological effect, a hegemonic effect. Right? This isn't to say that the Assyrians were always this brutal, but that when they did, they made sure to make us display or a show of force about it. So stelae are erected throughout the empire that depict these acts of tortures and these executions as a way of quelling rebellion from these different groups of people. Now we can see this most clearly at the siege of Lachish. In 701 BCE, Sennacherib wages war against the kingdom of Judah, and we can kind of look at this as one of the great archaeological evidences of historical documentation. This is recorded in the Bible as a battle of the Assyrians against the kingdom of Judah, and it's recorded in Assyrian texts, and archaeologically the things that we find at the site document well both accounts. So Sennacherib builds a massive earthen ramp that's covered up to the city wall. You can see it here in the documentary text, and this is the earthen ramp to build up to the top of the tell. And then there's a counter ramp extracted on the other side of the wall to help people fight it and to keep the wall safe. And archaeological excavations have actually validated most of what we see in the depictions at the site. There are thousands of arrowheads and sling bullets that are found near the city wall and on either side of it, and we know that the city is burned to the ground, is razed shortly after this siege ramp is constructed. So it tells us that the Assyrians were successful and they destroyed the city. And there's also an extensive mass grave of about 1,500 men, women, and children that's found on the western edge of the mountain that may be associated with this. So when we look at this, we can kind of see this kind of all coming together archaeologically. And here you can see the remnants of that siege. You have the Assyrian siege army marching up the ramps with siege weapons. You have the defenders of Lachish in the citadel firing weapons and sling bullets and stones back down the ramps. And then here you can see the aftermath of the battle with the Assyrian kings bringing Sennacherib the results. And here's the king of Lachish swearing fealty to the king of Assyria. And you have the populations who are being brought out of the city and being moved and deported, and then the individuals being tortured and sacrificed, flayed alive and decapitated here in front of the Assyrian nobility. And so when we look at the siege of Lachish, we can see this. You can see the burn layers that run throughout the archaeological excavations, the 1,500 the decapitated skulls that were stacked up outside the city wall, and the Assyrian-style arrowheads and sling bullets that are found throughout the remains. Now, I want you to watch a series of videos on the royal palace at Nineveh that kind of points to this battle at the siege of Lachish. And I want you to focus primarily on what is the iconography of Assyrian society and what is it trying to convey to those who view it. So when you see this battlefield description of like the Battle of Tiltuba, and you have the bodies laying across the field, and the Assyrian king Sennacherib here on a lion hunt across the plains, right? What do these types of images tell us? And what is the importance of that through this? And then finally, you can see the same type of feasting relief scene that we saw on the Standard of Ur. The same duality of society that we see all the way back to the beginning of Mesopotamian kingship positions is referenced here again in the Assyrians. The juxtaposition between the role of the king as warrior and the role of the king as connecting to the gods and providing through the symbolic feast for society. Because here you can see the garden party, the tree of life in Assyrian iconography, sprouted up behind the king as everyone else feasts and plays the music and dancing, the same types of things that we see on the Standard of Ur. So the Assyrians may have kind of relied on iconography to do this, but they're building on a long-standing Mesopotamian tradition that we can see referenced in each of these objects that we talked about: the Standard of Ur, the victory stele of Naram Sin, the Code of Hammurabi, and the depictions of the siege of Lachish and Sennacherib's palace in Nineveh.